Welcome to another stream. Today we are going to talk about why the Mortal Kombat movie is absolute garbage, and if you think otherwise, you are extraordinarily wrong and will possibly understand why by the end of this video live stream thing. So let's get right into it. We've got to start by going, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review. We got to start by going through this movie, like the timeline of events, to get the full picture to how dreadful of a film this is from top to bottom. So we start out and we are introduced to a happy little clan of a family, and we are introduced to one of two things in the movie that is good. And this will be the only two things in the movie that will be good. And that is, as soon as you see this area, if you are a fan of Mortal Kombat, you know exactly what you're looking at. You know this is Scorpion's clan, and by the look of everyone being happy, you know they're about to get fucked up by Sub-Zero's clan. So, this introduces the one of two good things in Mortal Kombat, and that is the lore is followed. So if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, you will know what's about to happen most of the time because whoever wrote this film understood the lore. That's a big win considering what we've gotten in Mortal Kombat or any video game movies in the past. And I think that win is the main reason people are acting like this movie was actually good. But it was not. But you're introduced to Scorpion and his family, and then just as you get into it and think that maybe this is going to be good because you can visually tell where the lore is going, you're introduced to the acting of this film. And oh boy, you realize the acting chops of this film, even when not in English, are going to be on par with every other Mortal Kombat movie we've had before. Now, if you know anything about other Mortal Kombat movies, the acting is very difficult to get through. And so even when the acting was in another language that I didn't understand, I already could tell I was in for it on the acting portion. So, of course, Sub-Zero comes and kills everyone, to be expected if you understand Mortal Kombat lore, which, again, is the only thing that this film gets right. And then we're taken forward in time. Raiden comes and takes the child of Scorpion, and that comes back later. We're taken forward in time and introduced to our new character, something. Holy hell, this is the worst character ever. So, holy hell, worst character ever, otherwise known as Cole, is exactly what you'd expect. As soon as he was on the screen, I looked at Mrs. Skeem. I said, I bet with these writers, this is just going to be a character with literally no personality at all that they had to insert in there to avoid using one of the main Mortal Kombat established characters as their main character, because these writers aren't going to be good enough to explain the Mortal Kombat lore without a neutral character that doesn't know anything. You could, try to put Johnny Cage in that role, but, Johnny Cage is such a boisterous character, it's harder to have him just neutrally listen to exposition. And if you're a bad writer, what you need is your main protagonist to be a dull enough character that he could just sit through hours of exposition from other characters to get filled in on what's going on, which is what you get in this film. A lot of exposition from Sonya Blade and Raiden and others to tell them what's going on. All the exposition is good to the lore. A cool shout out on Sonya's wall of some famous Mortal Kombat characters that only come in through time travel. But anyway, you're introduced to Cole, who's a sack of offal. Sub-Zero tries to kill him. Jax saves his ass. He goes to Sonya's place. And then we get introduced to the one and the only good character in this whole film, which is Kano. He's the only good character in the whole film. Just, that's it. There's not another good character in this whole movie, and there's a lot of characters. You have a random fight where Reptile shows up. Reptile looks dope as hell and then dies really fast, so that was cool. And then you travel through the desert. They find Raiden and the other people who need to defend Earthrealm, and they do, training montage stuff, and then there's not going to be a Mortal Kombat tournament because they want to kill them all before the tournament and take over Earthrealm, because why the fuck not? And after all that, it ends up being that there's just a Mortal Kombat tournament anyway, because Raiden literally teleports everyone to individual fighting posts to have a Mortal Kombat fucking tournament without it being a Mortal Kombat fucking tournament. And of course, all of the bad people die, and only one good person dies, and then, we don't get a final showdown with Raiden, or, I always forget his name, Soul Sucker Boy. He's been a villain for a long time. But we don't get a final showdown with Raiden and Soul Sucker Boy because they have to set up for the sequel. And then, of course, at the end, Cole needs to go to Hollywood to find new champions. One of those is obviously Johnny Cage. And then they go, see guys, we didn't forget that Johnny Cage is central to the story. We just had to establish Cole as the new main character of the series. And Cole, it turns out to be a descendant of Scorpion. Fine. He's the offspring of the baby that was saved by Raiden. He kills Gordo with his Aquaman suit, because apparently his power is an Aquaman suit and whatever. So that's like the short synopsis of what the fuck happens. It's a painful film to watch. Every time they had to do a liner from the movie, the only one that worked was "Get Over Here" by Scorpion. Every other line in this movie, the fatality, Kano wins, flawless victory, that they just cringily stuck in there when there's so many ways you could actually kind of figure out cool ways to put in those fan service moments. It was like, it felt like watching your dad try to feel like he was cool. Like, see, I know that the game says finish him. I know that the game says Kano wins. You get it, kids? Like, it was so cringy. And the type of fan service that's that hard to watch was throughout the whole movie. Every time we had to stop for dialogue, I was like hitting my head against the wall.
I don't know what a bid is, but I think
hey, thanks for the bid.
Hooray, money!
Unless Kano, and thank you for the appreciation fire. Unless Kano was involved in the dialogue was painful. The entire movie. Like, so painful. There was not a moment of dialogue from the start of the movie to the end in all 2 hours that wasn't painful unless Kano was involved. The Cole, who is our new protagonist, is one of the worst protagonists I've seen entered into film in a long fucking time. Like, a long time. So I promised that there was a second redeeming quality to the movie. I mentioned the first at the start of this. The first redeeming quality is the lore. The second redeeming quality are some of the fights. Not all of the fights. A lot of the fights are terrible. Some of the fights. And the fights that are good are the opening fight, and then the last fight was Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Pretty much all of the fights in between are either too short or too stupid to get into. And then the most disgraceful part is when the fake Mortal Kombat tournament gets started by Raiden through teleportation powers. Essentially, you had just sat through like 20 minutes or so of horrible dialogue with a couple of little set pieces in between. And then all of these characters that hadn't really been built that well at that point, like, they hadn't really been built up that well, like the villains. They just kind of been seen a couple times. All of a sudden, they're all dead within, like, 2 minutes of each fight. And you're like, okay, that was really easy. Like, it was really easy. Like, really fucking easy. There was hardly any sort of difficulty on the hero's end. And even in the old Mortal Kombat movies that sucked, you had a lot more of the heroes dying and a lot more struggle. In this movie, you had one hero who died. Everyone found their inner boner power, got teleported by Raiden, and won. Like, super easily. It was not well written. It was not well paced. And I do greatly appreciate the fact that they understood Mortal Kombat lore very well. And for some reason, people think that means it's a good movie. It's been baffling me, the people who are tweeting and defending this movie And all of them are like, yeah, it's just because you don't understand the lore. People who don't like it don't know the lore. No, I know the lore, and I get that they did the lore to the T. Correct. I knew everything that was going to happen before it happened because they were so accurate on the lore. Guess what? That doesn't make it a good movie to watch. It makes it a movie that at least respects its source material, albeit this is a weird prequel with a new version of Scorpion added in. And, you know, they put it in a timeline that it would make sense Johnny Cage wouldn't be involved. I mean, the entire reason they don't actually have a Mortal Kombat tournament in this is because the creators were respectful enough to know that the first major Mortal Kombat tournament that had Sonya and all these other people in it also had Johnny Cage. So they knew they couldn't have an actual Mortal Kombat tournament without Johnny Cage, so they did their weird Raiden teleporting people for a fake Mortal Kombat tournament to make sure that when they get their sequels, if they do get those greenlit, that Johnny Cage would be involved in the first Earthrealm Mortal Kombat of this set of characters. So the respect for the lore was very, very well done and very appreciated. And 2 of the major fight scenes, maybe 3, because the Gordo scene was almost cool. The reptile scene was cool, too short. So some of the fight scenes were good too. That's like the second good thing. The gore was also appreciated. But everything else, right? Everything else which takes up the other, I don't know, hour and 10 minutes of runtime, that's not lore, it's just more general exposition and character development, right? So you got about a 2-hour movie, about an hour and 10 minutes of that 2-hour movie, so more than half, is just terrible character building of Cole, who's an awful character in every perceivable way. That is a terrible character. Very poorly written. There's no reason that anyone with a semblance of emotional intelligence or other intelligence would care about this character, his stupid-ass family, or his very trite motives, and he is awful. He is fucking a disgrace to the Scorpion line and should just be ashamed of himself. So you had one interesting character, Kano. That was it. That was it. Kano was the only redeeming part. Now, so where do I put this movie? This movie for me is a 4 out of 10. So let's think about now, well, what about the other Mortal Kombat movies? The other Mortal Kombat movies are also terrible, and they don't have gore. The first Mortal Kombat movie respects the lore just about as well as this one, but it doesn't have the gore. But honestly, I found the acting in that to be more deliberately cheesy. So I would actually say the very original Mortal Kombat movie is about tied with this. This and the very first Mortal Kombat movie are about the same. They're both like a 4 out of 10, not a good movie. I would go back to I wouldn't go back to watch either of them, but if I was to, the reason I'd go back to the original would be because it's campy on purpose and kind of fun. The reason I would go back to this one is because between the horrendous attempts at establishing a serious narrative, there's really cool set pieces in gore and Kano. So when you make a movie that's on par with the first Mortal Kombat movie, you have not made a good movie. That's the problem. So yeah, the editing was also really weird. They would chop scenes at weird spots. The cinematography was not that great. Some of the set pieces looked super corny. Like, I remember when they did their little training area, it looked just as bad as some of the main arenas in the first Mortal Kombat movie, which was made in the 90s. So some of the effects were great, though. Here's the positive end of all of this. The 2 things that they got right could be carried into a sequel, right? I don't give a shit if it was the director's first movie. I'm saying what the movie was, and that was shit. Absolute shit. If you are a fan, all the movies kick ass. No, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Can everyone tell A Few Minutes with Crispy he's stupid as shit? Bro. If you're a fan of something, you should hold high standards for what you do with it. This movie respected lore, but didn't know how to make a movie. It felt like, you know, if you gave a couple of nerds who liked Mortal Kombat a really high budget, but these nerds had a 0 film experience, this is what you get. It's not a good movie. You'll never find anyone who takes film serious say that this is a good movie. Ever. You're not going to find a single person who looks at film and understands film who's going to say this movie is anything other than an ass of a movie. And this is coming from someone who loves Mortal Kombat lore. That's one of the only good things about it. That's it. But anyway, there are no legitimate arguments to be made for why this is a good film, because the pacing it breaks every rule of pacing. The editing is objectively bad. The effects are bad for half of it. The acting is probably some of the worst big budget acting I have ever seen. The main protagonist is one of the most poorly written main protagonists that has ever been written. And just because you do a couple cool fight scenes, have one enjoyable character, and respect the lore you're working with does not mean you made a good movie. It is an awful movie. The only redeeming hope is if they do get approved for sequels. If they do get approved for sequels, you have a chance at fixing some of it. I don't think you could fix the acting, right? You can't fix the acting because you've got the actors cast. Now, maybe if you get a new director, maybe these actors have more chops than they showed, and you just need a better director at the helm. I don't know. But you can get a new character for Johnny Cage because he's going to be in it, but then you'll just have the same thing with Kano. Like, maybe Johnny Cage is the only likable character. Someone said it's not a big budget film. I mean, it had $20 million budget. That's not a low budget film either. But like, I don't know how they're going to make a sequel better. Thanks for subscribing, Dragon Metal Queen. Like, I don't know how you're going to fix the mistakes, because the mistakes are in the pacing. You could fix the pacing. You can make a better paced sequel, especially since there's less lore to try to establish. And you can, I don't know what you're going to do about the acting. Maybe it's going to probably be the same director. I don't know. That's one of the hardest things, is the acting of this is so bad. And yeah, I was extraordinarily bored for most of the movie because every bit of dialogue was so painful. And not even all the fight scenes were satisfying. And they very, very much rushed the finale, which was about the only interesting thing. But at least we got a satisfying Scorpion Sub-Zero fight. But anyway, what I expect is a lot of people will be hyped about this movie right now because it just came out. Most people, when they just see a movie, they just, for some reason, think it's really good. And it takes time for that to wear off and realize that they don't like the movie. Luckily, I don't have that timetable issue that a lot of people do. So for most of you who are hyping it right now, unless you like hold this vendetta in your mind because I'm saying this, which you might, you won't like it a few weeks from now or a few months from now. You won't. For like 9 out of 10 of you who are hyping it, you like it right now because you got the adrenaline of seeing cool stuff. You'll go back to it and you will hate it because it's not a good movie. It's an objectively bad movie, just like every other Mortal Kombat movie we've gotten. The only thing that made this different is they made it a rated R movie, which is very needed for Mortal Kombat. But there have been other Mortal Kombat movies that respected the lore like this, and that were just as bad. It's a 4 out of 10. There's no way to justify a higher score than that. Now, will diehard fans like it? Some people like no matter what you give them. I feel like this felt like more of a movie made by fans of Mortal Kombat, but so was the very original Mortal Kombat film, just minus the gore. But it didn't save it. It didn't save it. And all I would say is if you know anyone who says that this is a good movie, not a movie that they enjoyed, right? Because someone might enjoy this movie, that's fine. Like all they've wanted from a Mortal Kombat movie for the last 20, 30 years is just for it to actually be gory, to use the fight moves from the actual game, to respect the lore, and they don't care about anything else. They could care less. They could not care less about how terrible the dialogue is, how terrible the scripting is, the pacing, the cinematography. They don't care about any of that. All they wanted was true Mortal Kombat lore with true Mortal Kombat gore. That's it. And so they're gonna love the movie. But do not trust someone who can't separate that personal love with what the movie was. Because anyone looking at the movie as an actual movie outside of their personal nostalgia boners or whatever for it will know this is just a trash movie. And so I would say, this would be a good time. I always say there's certain movies that are a good time to pulse check people around you if you should take their movie recommendations or not. This is one of those good pulse check movies. This is one of those good movies to see who's hyping it up. If you see someone hyping it up, you just know don't take movie recommendations from that person, right? Every now and then there gets to be one of these fun movies where you get that special opportunity of if someone hypes it up, don't trust their judgment on movies unless you like all the same shit that they do. If you like all the same shit that they do, sure. But that would be someone showing you that they don't have a filter for separating I liked this versus this was good, right? There's a big difference between I liked this and this was good. In this case, I neither liked it nor was it good. But there have been plenty of movies where I don't like it and it's good, or I do like it, but it was bad. This movie, unfortunately, was a double whammy. I would go back and watch some of the fights again because they were very fun to watch. I liked some of the pieces they took in from the game, like freezing blood to stab someone with it again. There was a lot of satisfying stuff to the fights, and the way they actually respected and knew the lore was great because I knew what was coming next in a good way, not in a bad way. But that didn't save the rest. That really, really didn't save the rest. Oh yeah, Mrs. Skeem throughout the movie was mocking it because she was pulling lines from Mulan, Inside Out, other things. That's how bad the writing was. The writing was so cringy. Harder, better, faster, stronger, Daft Punk. This is what you've brought me. I'll make a man out of you, Mulan. I die for my family, which is from Inside Out. I die for Riley. Like the dialogue was so bad. Not to mention all of the quotes from the video games, which were just done as cheesily as possible. Like I said, it reminded me of like if your dad was trying to be cool. They say fatality, right? It was bad. It was real bad. So yeah, this is really about the same level as the very first Mortal Kombat movie that was made, but the set pieces and gore is cooler. However, I think the first one is more watchable in the sense that it was more self-aware about being cheesy. This one doesn't really even realize that it was cheesy half the time. It sometimes it knew it was cheesy and other times it didn't. That was another really bad thing. One thing that a sequel could do, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, a sequel to this could really make this a great film if it embraced the B-movie qualities of this movie. This movie never embraced its B-movie feel. For some reason, it was like a B-movie type of movie trying to masquerade as something it wasn't, right? It was doing these corny one-liners, but also trying to have this sense of seriousness, and that's what made it so cringy and hard to watch and also boring. Like, if they would have just embraced how stupid what they were doing was, instead of trying to be a hybrid, it would have been a lot more fun. So I feel like if a sequel with Johnny Cage, they just go all for the stupid, kind of like the Fast and the Furious series as it went on, stopped caring about physics and went full stupid, it became far more enjoyable. I think Mortal Kombat, if it embraces the stupid more, would actually be far more enjoyable. And it would actually be a better film, because if you make a film that's self-aware of how stupid it is, when you're rating it as a film, it's actually better than a film that's not self-aware of how stupid it is. So I think that's actually one of the best places a sequel could go. Make the acting bad more on purpose than on accident and just embrace the cheese. I think that sequel could be like an 8 out of 10. Maybe a 7 out of 10. Don't get too carried away. But now that I've gone over the movie, 4 out of 10 movie, will not watch it again, ever. I'll just play the game because the game's got the same lore and is just a lot more enjoyable, and the acting's better in the games, especially Mortal Kombat 9. But let me take some questions from the chat. Yeah, no, Mrs. Skeem is right. The movie is not self-aware at all. At any point. Well, there's a couple points the movie's self-aware, but most of it is not. And that's one of the things that makes it so hard to watch. Like, so fucking hard to watch. All right, I'm going to take some stuff from the chat now that I've said my piece on the movie. And like I said, if you see people hyping this movie as a great movie, not just something that they liked, probably don't trust their opinion on movies. It's not a good movie. But it's something that some people will like. I didn't like it as a huge Mortal Kombat fan. I didn't like it because I'm also a huge film fan, and it took itself way too seriously for what it was. So questions, who should play Johnny in the sequel? I would vote, well, it's going to be a younger Johnny. So Ryan Reynolds if it was older Johnny. So if they fast forward into the future more, like after the first Mortal Kombat tournament or something, Ryan Reynolds. A younger Johnny Cage, that's tough. I don't know of any young dickhead actors. I think we were talking about like Michael B. Jordan, but people will get all pissed at the race swap there, but I feel like that could be a good casting for a younger one, but I don't really know. Let's see. How was the CGI? Mostly good. There were a couple parts that was a little off, but the CGI was mostly pretty good. The actual bigger issue with it were some of the set pieces were really corny, more than the CGI. Did you go into a Mortal Kombat movie expecting great writing? No, I expected pretty bad writing, but not that bad. Like I said, if the movie was aware of how bad it was, that would be fine. The movie just was not aware of how bad it was, so that made it very unpleasant to watch. I guess if there's no other questions, this was going to be a quick thing anyway. A nice spoiler-filled review of Mortal Kombat. I do not recommend it if you haven't seen it. It is on HBO Max, though, so I guess you could watch it and just fast-forward through the fight scenes, or if you really have nothing better to do with 2 hours. The fight sets are worth watching once. I don't think you'll see it again. It's not likely something you'll rewatch, and it's not something that... If I had seen it, would I have gone... Like, if I knew exactly what it was, would have I watched it? Maybe drunk. Probably a good one to watch drunk. How do I think they should go about the sequel if they get one? I think they should embrace the cheesiness, because they can't really fix the casting of the actors. Cole is a terrible protagonist. They would need to rewrite him, make him a lot more interesting. Like, a lot more interesting of a character. He's a horrible character. So the sequel would need to make Cole a lot more interesting. They could use Johnny Cage to make him more interesting. Maybe Johnny Cage gives him a little more personality. Kano wasn't able to give him personality. Maybe Cage could. Sonya was also written very poorly, but I think Sonya and Johnny, since they become a love interest, that could make an interesting dynamic to make her character better, but her acting's really bad too. Jax seemed like he was a good actor, but didn't get any screen time. So I'd like to see more of him. So maybe more Jax. Johnny can try to fix Cole and Sonya, and then just embrace the cheesiness of it. Like, if they would just embrace the fact that they did not successfully make this a serious narrative like they tried for some reason. I mean, it's not like they always tried. They were doing one-liners from the video games, right? They had some self-awareness, but all of the stuff in between the fight scenes when they were pulling one-liners was super, super serious in all of the cringiest ways. And like the one-liners in the fight scenes wouldn't have been as cringy if they were being equally stupid in between. So I think if the sequels just embrace the cheese factor and just treat it more like a B movie or like a Fast and Furious movie where physics and, all that shit doesn't exist, then the sequel would be a lot better. That would be my opinion of where they should go with the sequel if they get one. They need to kill off Cole and make Johnny the main character. They're not going to do that, but if they did, that would be an excellent move. An excellent, excellent move. Cole was a failed venture. And then you could have Scorpion just resurrect from hell and just continue his bloodline himself. Kano was definitely the best character. That wasn't even close. He was actually, in my opinion, the only good character in the whole film was Kano. No other character was at all good. Sub-Zero and Scorpion were hardly characters at all. They were set pieces for fights, so you can't really say that they were good. But Kano was the only actually well-done character, which makes it even more tragic they didn't have Johnny Cage, since he's such a similar character, but like an opposite of Kano. They could have had two good characters. Mrs. Skeem says they needed an American Asian for representation for some reason. Not that there weren't other Asians, but that's what Mrs. Skeem says Cole was for. I don't think that's what Cole was for. I think Cole was for the fact that these writers knew they were not very good and didn't know how to tell the story without having a neutral character that they could manipulate into the story. It'll be interesting because, they'll obviously resurrect Sub-Zero for sequels because that's in the lore. And he also got poofed away to do so. I'll be curious as this series goes on, if it continues to get greenlit to go on, depending on its success, if they'll follow the arc where Sub-Zero eventually becomes good and Scorpion becomes more bad. They'd kind of have trouble doing the Scorpion bad. I guess Cole is the baseline. He could fight his own legacy. The dialogue, 2 out of 10. The dialogue is very rough. Sub-Zero will be back as Noob. Could be, but that'd be... fuck that. Make Sub-Zero come back as Sub-Zero. Noob can be his own shit. But you're probably right. This idiot. I'm sorry, King Dota. That's probably the dumbest thing that's been said so far. If you didn't like this, you must hate the raid. The raid is probably one of the best, fight martial arts type thing ever. It's a classic movie, critically praised because it's amazing. How are you comparing this to the raid? You should feel ashamed of yourself for comparing this to the raid. You should feel physically bad about yourself for comparing this to the raid. I don't get offended by a lot, but that's actually kind of offensive from a film perspective to compare this to the raid. My God, I'm glad being a film critic was not in your career. It is not. You do not understand acting or pacing or story at all. You literally saw this movie and all you saw was fight scenes. You didn't see anything in between. Clearly. Some of the choreography had elements of a lesser version of the raid, and that's it. Bro, that was some blasphemous bullshit I just saw in my chat. I feel dirty being a part of it. Do not ever put the raid through the dirt like that again. You go look up some film and audience reviews of the raid versus this movie. Come back and apologize for what you did. My goodness. I would like to apologize to the gods of film for the blasphemous things that have been said against one of the greatest martial arts fight brawl gore fest that's ever been made. That's the most disgusting thing I've heard in a while. I have a great appreciation for film, if you guys didn't know that about me. Like a great, deep appreciation. One of the things I was considering doing as my profession was going to be a film critic, but it's just a hard industry to get to, so I didn't go that way. But bro, that was offensive. That was disgusting what you just said, vilely disgusting. You should never say things like that. King Dota, if you write movies, they ain't good. Because you just admitted that you don't watch anything in a fighting film except for the fights. I'm officially done reading anything King Dota says before I lose too many brain cells. Everyone else who liked the Mortal Kombat movie at least came with some sort of sanity, but this man is just speaking absolute nonsense. So what other comments for those who have seen or not seen the movie, or questions or whatever do you have aside from King Dota? Because my brain can't take more of that shit. Ugh. That raid comment, you done on that one. You blitzed yourself there. Any credibility you might have still been clinging to, gone. Gone right there. And anyone who's seen the raid or knows about the raid knows and is right there with me that all your credibility just died. But what else you guys got? What does Flea Skeem think about the movie? Well, Flea Skeem is a she. She says it's rough. Oh, well, she slept through the whole thing. but that's what she does for most movies. It's hard to get a read on her. Hopefully the 3 characters we've seen as Easter eggs will be in the sequel. Well, we know at least Johnny Cage. Well, I don't know about, what's his name? The Native American, because he was teased at. I don't remember his name. There'd have to be time travel for him to get in there. Who was the other one that was teased at? I don't remember. You have to let me know. Have you ever played any of the fan Mortal Kombat games? No, I've not played fan-made Mortal Kombat games. Kotal was the other one. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see them all. Oh, yeah, they had the big fucking statue of them, didn't they? Okay. How were Scorpion and Sub-Zero? I mean, they weren't really characters, but they were good set pieces. Like, they had some of the most enjoyable scenes, but they were hardly characters. The number of times Scorpion did random face reveals in the last scene was super stupid. He's like, oh, it's my face. And he's like, yeah, we've seen it. Stop doing that. But, you know, as set pieces, they were good. What else you guys got? Anything? We wrapping this up? Probably wrapping this up. To anyone I clowned about a video game, if you took it personally, that's really weird. About a video game movie and a video game, if you took it personally, that's really weird. If you're new to me, I'm always going to clown you when you say something that I find silly. I still love King Dota, but I'm never going to ask his opinion on movies again. And I am deeply offended about what you said about the raid, and you should pray on that and ask for forgiveness for your sins. But other than that, it was fun. Wasn't my cup of tea of a movie, nor do I think it was a good movie objectively outside of my own personal opinions on it. My personal opinion on it is closer to a 2 out of 10, but I think it's a 4 out of 10 just because of the cool set pieces. But I had a good time with you guys nerding it up. We'll see if any of these other movies come out soon, and I'll give you my feedback and review. I'll leave the stream up if you want to rewatch it after, for anyone who might want to rewatch it after they've already seen the movie or whatever. But it's been fun, guys. I'm going to go do something else now, probably work. But until next time, I scheme, you scheme, we all scheme for ice cream. Bye!